so much for transparency.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
The door's been knocked on.
Today is January 13th. Welcome to the regular Public Works Finance Committee meeting. And the first item on our agenda today is the selection of the committee chair and vice chair. And I'd like to kick that off by nominating Gina to be the chair.
I'll second that. I'll third it.
All right, so you accept the nomination, all
I do.
right?
Thank you.
Gina is now the chair, and I'll finish this item,
Please
I
do.
suppose, before you take over. So for nominations for the vice chair,
I nominate Sandra Kelly.
and I second.
Third it.
All right, then we have Gina Terusio is the chair of Public Works and Finance Committee for 2020, and Sandra Kelly is the vice chair. And now I will hand it over to our chair.
Thank
Gina.
you. Thank you. Welcome, Sandra, to the chairhood. It's pretty exciting, or the vice chairhood. That's even cooler, actually. Okay, our second item on our agenda is the approval of the December 9th Public Works Finance Committee meeting minutes.
I move approval of the minutes as written.
A second?
Okay, looks like we will approve those, sir.
Thank you.
The third item is a disbursement report for December 2019. Sarah Banks.
Yes. So if you look at the, is this on? Can you hear me now? Okay. Looking at month end December 31st, 2019, our expenditures totaled $1,874,079.86. When you're looking through this report, our largest expenditure, which is always our largest, is our payroll at $1,080,537. In your packet, there is a sheet that says major expenditures, and this is something, since this is the first time on here, I can kind of explain. I mean, I know that you see all of the checks that come through, but this is kind of an abbreviation of everything. We have our professional services, we have supplies, and payroll contractual payments. This is just kind of for you to get an overview of all of our large expenditures. Because it is January, we do not have any major capital expenditures going on right now. We usually wait until after we receive our taxes. So come February, you'll start seeing a lot of major payments. Our largest one was actually also a repair and maintenance in the amount of $47,852, and that was for a belt filter and drum replacement, which was part of the wastewater treatment plant. So other than that,
Water reclamation and
Oh.
reuse facility.
Oh,
man.
yes.
Oh, big foul.
sorry, I could feel the burn back here. Yes, water reuse and reclamation
What
facility.
you said.
Yes. So other than that, that's it. That's the breakdown of the expenditures, and if you have any questions, let me know.
The process for this is the finance director brings those forward. This committee approves them, signs off on the authorization, and then we bring it to council as a consent agenda item just to ratify that approval.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Sarah?
So this is covering the disbursement report and the financial report right now?
No.
Or we're just doing the
Quarterly
disbursement?
financials come next.
Okay,
Come next, yeah. Okay, so any questions then? Brandy?
nope.
Okay, Sandra?
Nope.
All right, then I think we'll sign that report for you.
Great.
Okay, and just a second.
Okay, our next item. Was that just a second before we moved on?
I had to change the name.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Which name?
Okay. Sarah Banks again. Thank you, Brandy. If you would present to us the first quarter financial reports.
Yes, so what you have in front of you is our revenues and expenses that go for the first 3 months of the year, which is October, November, and December. Typically, about this time, we would be expecting to be about 25% in all of our expenditures and revenue, give or take. If you look down, you can see that pretty much every category falls somewhere along that line. There are a few 100%, mostly with transfers, and that's in the Recreation and Culture. That would be our Fleet Fund and IS, and all of those is each budget year, we have a transfer that'll either go to IS or Fleet, and at the first of the year, we'll make 100% transfer of that amount. We also have repair and maintenance that's spread out within our internal service funds by each fund, and those are put back to those two funds per month. So that's a little different. This would be for more of a capital purchase or something that's done immediately. So if you look at the bottom of our report, if I have that, it looks like in total revenues, we're about 18.64% at this point, and total expenditures, 20.42.
Okay.
Which is where we expect to be this time of year.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions
Sure,
about
let's do.
revenue line items. I'm just curious with the transit center and IS are, especially transit centers at 64% of revenue for the year. Does that mean that more of that comes in this quarter than the rest of the year, or that it's likely going to be larger than was
And
anticipated?
we lease the transit center to the Smart Transit, University of Idaho Parking and Transportation, and PEP. PEP and the University of Idaho prefer to pay their bills once per year, so it's front-loaded. The Smart Transit pays theirs on either a quarterly or a monthly basis. I can't remember when. So you'll see most of that come in, or a larger percentage in the first quarter, and then later on, it'll be a smaller percentage, but we'll get to 100% by the end of the year.
Okay, so the total amount is still projected to be
Correct.
unchanged? And
Yes.
is the same for IS? That's not as much over, but it's at 35.
Right, and actually with that one, I believe last time I looked at it, that was a grant revenue that came in. We have our normal monthly revenues that come, but that is part of that, so it made it a little bit higher at this point, but that again should even out, and I don't anticipate over 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Sandra, any questions?
Nope.
As a corollary to that, whenever we get to construction season, you'll see the expenditure side of the house go up percentage-wise much higher because we're spending money on projects. So it'll be very little the first quarter into the second quarter, then it'll spike toward the end of the third and the fourth quarter. So it's just the cycle of the expenditures and revenues of the city.
Actually, do you have one other
Sure,
that,
sure.
do you know what the LID construction funds were used for? What project that was? I think it was like 16,000 or
That was
something.
in capital.
Yes, it got transferred into capital. I can't recall exactly what for at this point. That's right, Sixth Street Bridge.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. You need a motion, Mr. Reedner?
Yes, to approve, and we will publish it.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the quarterly financial report.
I'll second that.
Okay. All right, Mr. Reedner, it's approved, and that would go then on consent?
Yes.
Okay. Our next item is a lot line adjustment for 1614 Christopher Lane. Thank you, Sarah. Amy Henrich. Is that right? Did I say it right? Henrich. If I'd used my phonics, I would know this. Okay. Hi. Good.
So today we have a lot line adjustment for 1614 Christopher Lane, lots 12 and 13, located in Block A of Christopher Crossing subdivision. Oops, wrong button. Maybe not. The batteries decided to run out on me. I do have that problem sometimes.
It says it's got back.
There we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Just had to reset, Zach.
So the lot line adjustment process is intended to adjust common lot lines between adjoining properties. Applicants typically submit a letter of request, a site plan, and a legal description. Staff reviews the application to determine compliance with zoning requirements. And then the application is reviewed by the Public Works and Finance Committee. The committee typically makes a recommendation to full council and places the item on consent agenda. So these are the two lots. This is Lot 12, if I can get the point. Yep, Lot 12 here, and Lot 13. The subject properties are located in the suburban residential zoning district. Within the zoning district, lots are limited to single-family dwellings that require a minimum of 1 acre. Minimum lot widths in the front are 100 feet and 20 feet for flag lots. Lot 12 is currently 1.25 acres, and Lot 13 is 1.95 acres. The applicant currently owns both lots. This is the record of survey showing the current lot line. Let's see. Right here, and the proposed new lot line here. Again, this would increase Lot 12 and decrease Lot 13 by 0.17 of an acre, creating new Lot 12, which would be 1.42 acres, and Lot 13, which would be 1.78 acres. As I said before, the suburban residential district, lot fronts are required to be 100 feet and flag lots at 20 feet and a minimum of 1 acre. All of these, both of these lots would meet those recommendations. So staff would recommend that, staff recommends approval for this lot line adjustment with no conditions. Do you have any questions?
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, pretty straightforward and not a humongous change, really.
No,
So,
and really,
no.
it's just they have landscaping already on one portion of the lot, they're just adjusting it over, so.
Yeah, it didn't look like there were any pathways or connectors that would be interfered with. Right.
Nope.
Okay. Sandra, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. I move we recommend approval of the lot line adjustment request with no conditions.
I believe you need to, let's see if there's any comment.
Oh, all
Public
right.
comment?
I apologize for that. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come up for public comment on this adjustment?
There you go.
Okay, then. Awesome. I'll ask first next time instead of moving on, sorry. All right, then I'm still recommending approval, making a motion that we approve it, the lot line adjustment request with no conditions as recommended.
Second.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Okay. Our next item. Thank you,
You
Amy.
want that on the consent agenda, ma'am?
Yes, please. Our next item is a sewer conveyance vacuum truck purchase. Tyler Palmer, this is glamorous.
This is going to be a fun one.
Ah,
So, this is one of those hypercritical things that we get to talk about that a lot of people maybe don't think about when you think about city operations. We're here to talk about what is actually outside of the fire department, the most expensive single vehicle that the city runs and one of the most critical. So this is, you may have seen it out on the streets. It's, our current vehicle looks like this one right here. This is actually the vehicle itself. It's a large unit that has a large vacuum tank. There are water tanks under here, and there's a hose reel that comes off the front of these type of units. It's just out of sight on this. But it's a jet truck and a vacuum truck, and it's used in our sewer conveyance system. And so it's what goes out, routinely cleans, runs the system. It's what we send out if there's a backup. They're pretty sophisticated trucks. This is a unit that we purchased several years ago in 2011, and this was when we were going through the emissions changes. There were emission standard changes. We had Tier 1, then Tier 2, and Tier 3. There was a period when International, which is one of the large engine manufacturers, during that transitionary period, tried a technology where they kind of took a different route than some of the other truck manufacturers. And they were trying to avoid using diesel emission fluid, which is an additional fluid that got added to help minimize the amount of emissions that come out of diesel vehicles. Long story short, it didn't work great for them. And this luckily was the only one of these engines, one of these chassis that we ended up with in the fleet. But we've had pretty consistent problems with this truck. So we were accumulating monies to replace this truck. We currently have $364,154. Our target for this vehicle is about $425,000 is what we anticipated the cost to come in at. It got to the point this year where we'd had this truck down for about 30% of the time, and it is a critical unit. We've only got one of these, and it's the one that has to respond, and it's very expensive if we have to either get a rental unit, if we're able to get one, or have somebody back us up from a private company if they can come in. And so it was something that we made the proposal that came through sewer and through fleet that we pursue an early replacement of this vehicle. And I've got to brag about a couple people right now. Through this process, we've got Carl Riedinger, who is our fleet manager, and Justin Smith, who's here with us, who Justin supervises the conveyance group. these two really got after it, and it was very impressive to me. As I mentioned, we had $425,000 was our target. And as they looked at the truck and looked at what our needs were, it's really easy when you're looking at some of these things to get really wrapped up in wants instead of needs. And there's a lot of gee-whizzy cool stuff that you can get on these kind of trucks. And they really did a great job at looking at what we actually need. You know, these trucks now, some of them have really fancy digital readouts on the front with color screens, and you can do all kinds of crazy presets and selections. And as Justin and Carl got looking at it and they looked at the realities of our system, they said, you know what? It's going to operate better. It's going to be easier if we just go with a good old traditional manual front end of this thing. And, you know, those kinds of decisions can save us thousands and thousands of dollars. And so they really did a good job. So they were able to spec out a vehicle. And in addition, by going with more of a standard, bare bones, if you will, but it'll get the job done type vehicle, we're able to identify a vehicle that's already been built rather than have to have a custom built vehicle, which would kick us into the next model year. And that alone would have cost us an additional $24,000. So just kudos to these guys for being creative and getting after it. And so what we're proposing here is that we use the $364,154,000. We have a price on the unit through a bidding consortium that Carl will explain here in a second that came in at $379,659. That includes a $30,000 trade-in for our current unit, which we were actually ecstatic to get. We thought that it'd pretty much just get scrapped out, and so we were very happy to see that number. And so, yeah, and that leaves about $15,505, which we're proposing to fund out of some accumulation that we have for some other vehicles within the sewer fund, we're within fleet for sewer vehicles. So, Carl, you want to talk a little bit about the consortium and how we're proposing to procure this?
Right, so these types of vehicles we can do through a Sourcewell contract. So there's very few companies in the country that make these type of vehicles. So these companies will go through, used to be called NJPA. In the past, we've used that for fire apparatuses, loaders, that kind of thing. This one is through Sourcewell, and Vacon put it together. So we're asking to participate in their bid. So the truck's already bid out instead of going through a bid process. That is their low bid on their stock unit.
It's a process that we were really happy to be able to participate in. For a while, there had been an interpretation that perhaps the Idaho State Constitution wouldn't allow us to participate in national government bids like this, and so it's a consortium where they'll conduct a bidding nationwide to try and get that economy of scale, and then they'll offer it to any governmental entity. But about 4 years ago, we received direction from the Attorney General for the state of Idaho that said that we were able to participate in these sort of purchasing consortiums. And so that's been a real boon for us, especially as a small kind of geographically isolated entity, to be able to access these sorts of bids has been really good for us. So we ran this process through we came to council a few months ago, you'll recall, to talk about our alternate fuel transition plan, and we have lenses through which we view any sort of vehicle replacement. And so the first thing we look at is there a viable electric hybrid model to complete this task? At this point, there's just not for this type of work. The type of power that's required, it just does not lend itself to that yet. Are there opportunities for combined use with another vehicle? We haven't combined use on this one, but one thing that they really did that I'm very pleased with is that they were able to really do some research. Our current model actually has 2 engines on it. So it has the regular chassis engine, and this right here, that's a second engine that runs some of the components. This is the model that we're proposing to buy, and you can't see it all that well, but there is no engine here. It runs off the single chassis engine, and so we'll have pretty significant fuel savings, and because of the design of the vehicle, we don't lose any performance. And so that was a really good creative way of them looking at this, looking at what our actual systemic needs are and being able to drop a second motor. So we didn't technically combine units, but we did go from 2 different motors down to 1 motor for this vehicle. And we feel like we really have done a good job at looking at the needs. So does the proposed vehicle best meet the needs for which it is intended? And they did a really good job at really censoring that down and getting us from a $425,000 unit down to about a $400,000 unit flat. And so that was really good work on that part. Yeah. And so, yeah, what we're recommending is just the approval of the replacement in this budget year, so bring this forward 1 year. And ask that you direct staff to bring the adjustment forward in the 2020 open budget process. And with that, we'd stand for any questions you might have.
So it is just a year forward?
Yes,
Okay.
this was slated to be programmed in the FY21 budget, and we're moving it forward, proposing to move forward 1 year.
That's what I was going to ask. So you assume a 10-year life on?
Or,
We,
what is it on this one? Is it 15?
this one, it was 15, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our
Too much.
anticipated life is, yeah,
Too
Yeah.
long.
too long for especially that last chassis.
Maybe more realistic for the new one? Would you be
We hope so.
optimistic?
We have vehicles configured like this one already, and we've had a really good track record with them. This vehicle, for example, the very first oil change that we did on this vehicle, we send in our oils, especially on these larger vehicles. We have the oil sampled so that we can really early on diagnose if there are problems. They found aluminum shavings in the oil sample on the very first oil change that we did on this. I mean, these were found to be pretty bad motors right from the get-go.
Did we get anything back because of that bad motor? Was it a warranty issue at all?
They've done a pile of warranty work on it, limping it along and keeping it going. There's a class action lawsuit against International that's making its way through the courts. We don't know what will happen with that, but we're going to keep the sewers flowing.
You raised your hand.
Yes, as indicated in the CCSR, we do have accumulations that we will pay for with this, but the expenditure was not appropriated in the FY 2020 budget, so we'll bring it forward in the open budget process in August, where we will ask the council, if you give us authority to order this thing, we will do so, and then as a perfunctory matter, we will bring it forward in August for the council to adjust the annual appropriation ordinance in order that we can purchase it this year.
And one thing I want to mention is that we've put a lot of work through the budget process. These accumulations are what allows this kind of flexibility. One of the things we're really trying to do is good vehicles that we can make them last, but the way that we're able to do that is, Gary and Sarah have worked really hard to make sure that we do have accumulations going toward these things, so we're not trying to accumulate the entirety of something in the very last year. And so that does allow a little bit of flexibility. So something like this, where it's like, this needs to go, we can offset that. For example, one of the things that the 15,000 can be offset because we have a unit that's used to haul sludge from the reuse facility out to LSI. That's a great vehicle, and that comes up next year, and we don't anticipate needing to replace that next year. And so those are the kind of decisions that we can be a little bit more agile and nimble, knowing that we have the funding to move things back and forth if need be.
Yeah.
I think you just answered it right there, but so you don't anticipate taking that 15,000 now, creating a problem in the near future?
No, that's a vehicle that we have about $150,000 accumulated toward a $220,000 vehicle, but that truck runs great. We don't anticipate needing to replace that probably for several years, and so it shouldn't have a large negative impact on our ability to get that funded.
Sandra, any questions?
Oh, Brandy covered that one.
Do you have any more?
Yeah, one last thing. So look, it sounds like this could be a pretty quick process then, once you have the.
Yeah, so the vehicle is in the region. It's actually, we think that the vehicle that they'll actually end up providing to us is already out at our facility. Our current vehicle is down again, and so they provided a vehicle as a loaner, and we think that the loaner
nice.
vehicle is the one that actually may just end up staying here. And so it could be something that could be pretty quick.
Awesome.
I have a question that's not exactly about the buying part, but when we need a loaner vehicle, what happens? What's the process for getting one?
It depends on the vehicle, and it can be really challenging, especially for specialized equipment, things like street sweepers, jet trucks, and those sorts of things. We try and maintain good relationships and good contacts and really know what's available regionally, and so we'll know on the private side who has something that they may be able to rent to us or rent the service to us, and then also just maintaining good relationships with our vendors so that if we do get in a bind, we can have that. And then also relationships with other cities. We'll talk with, other cities have this type of equipment, Lewiston, Pullman. And so if we try and have a good mutual aid relationship so that if something comes, we can help each other out.
Thanks.
So this is, I know, a drop in the bucket, but if this is the one that we end up purchasing, could you apply whatever you're paying for renting it right now towards the purchase price?
They actually aren't charging us a rental right
Setting it
now.
up
So
as a
they're
demo.
saying, this is a demo. And so they've actually been really good. We're looking at generally right around $3,000 to $4,000 a week typically is what it costs to rent one of these. And we've had this one now for over a week. And so they've been very good to try and help us out.
We did that same sort of arrangement with the ladder truck, the fire truck that we have. We bought a demo that saved us several $1,000s.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Well, I would recommend approval of replacement of Unit 148 in the FY 2020 budget year.
I'll second that.
I will third that.
Thank you.
Carl and Justin? Thank you. Thank you for your efforts on this. That was great. And thanks for showing up to this meeting. Okay, Tyler, thank you. Our next item is, I did have a question about that. Is, because we need to bring it forward when we go through the open budget thing, do we want to put it anywhere else other than
No,
the consent?
consent's fine. It's had the full consensus of the committee, and if one of the other council members wants to pull it off,
They
they
can pull it
can.
off at the time. Okay,
It's pretty standard.
okay, awesome. All right, our next item is the Police Department Traffic Enforcement Mobilization Grant. That's a really long title. Elisa, hello. And Officer Warner, I take it, okay?
Good afternoon.
Hello there.
So this is a program that the city's actually participated in for over 15 years. It's somewhat changed over time, but I'll just give you a little bit of historical information. Basically, the program, we apply in the late fall of each year, and the state of Idaho, through their Office of Highway Safety, will offer different types of mobilizations that they've had for many years. Some of them, we look at impaired driving, seatbelt, aggressive driving, those types of things, or they'll have impaired driving offered over Labor Day weekend, 4th of July, those types of things. So there used to be about, I think there was 10 mobilizations a year. They've whittled them down now so that we can then apply for what's called a mini grant for things such as homecoming weekend, Moscow Mardi Gras, those things. So now individual cities and counties can apply for mini grants for events happening in their community, and then also the ones that are available that the state offers consistently throughout the year. So over time, our applications have ranged from 30,000, and now we're down right around 15,000 to 18,000 a year, and then we can apply for the mini grants for additional. I'm going to let Officer Warner kind of tell you a little bit about what he's been managing the program for last year, and then this year he'll be doing it. So a little bit about what he does when he's out in the field, and then we'll talk about the approval process.
I took over in the spring last year, managing the grants, managing the overtime and the hours worked with the officers, having them sign up. Right now, we're looking at 5 mobilizations for 2019, 2020. Years, and like Alyssa was saying, in years past, there's been up to 14. My first year here in 2015, there was 14 mobilizations, with several other mobilizations with like cops on a bus. I don't know if you guys remember that.
No.
It was for texting. It was a texting and driving emphasis. We had police officers on a bus. There's a couple different ideas I've had with like texting and driving using bicycle officers or plainclothes bicycle officers. It'd be one of the mini grants that we would apply for. Right about the time students would start to come back, that sort of thing. Right now in its infancy, I'm trying to find out if I can combine a mobilization for the, Mardi Gras and the Lionel Hampton Music Festival, which brings in a couple extra thousand people into the area, the city, for a very short period of time. I'm just going to apply for that. That's in its infancy, if I can say that. And right now, our totals are well under the 50,000, even with the mobilizations for the mini grants.
I'll just give you kind of an example of, say, last year at this time, they did a Super Bowl impaired emphasis, and they had, just during the time period that, I think it was 18 days of the emphasis, 81 contacts. During that time, there were 11 uninsured motorists, and then there were 8 other citations given during that time. Also, during the period of time throughout, even though it wasn't on an overtime basis, there were 241 contacts. So keep in mind, these are only for overtime hours. And so officers usually sign up for those separately depending upon their existing shifts, and then that's when they happen. So we're only reimbursed from the state for the overtime portion. A little bit, let's see, I'm looking at like a seatbelt emphasis. There was from last year 161 contacts made during that period of time. So there's, it's a lot of work for the officers, and we've been short-staffed up until recently for about a year and a half, 2 years. And so there always wasn't a lot of people to sign up. And so they've done very well, still supporting the emphasis program and just maintaining their existing shifts. So I know it's been a burden on them, and they've still done very well, and it does keep people on their toes somewhat throughout the city. And they do public outreach announcements of the emphasis before they go out, and so people do have an opportunity to know we've got things coming on, and the state will normally provide us with a draft of a public service announcement to put out. And so we're just not trying to cold catch people. If you watch, you'll know that it's coming, but still, we should all be abiding by the laws without that, right? So the process that we've developed for this program is that we ask for an amount not to exceed $50,000. And we haven't reached that amount in many years since they've stopped providing, the 15 or so mobilizations. However, it does give us an opportunity if the officers are able to staff and provide the mini grants through a specialized emphasis that Officer Warner shared about, then we wouldn't have to come back to you for individual ones. And then also we had on this one, asking for actual ratification on this. It was a busy time when the contract had to go in and we weren't able to get on the agenda. So the contract that you saw that came in the packet with this, we call it the TPIGA. It's, the Transportation Mobilization, Traffic Enforcement Mobilization Grant Program. So that's where we get the initials for that. So today we're asking for a ratification of the execution of that contract that the mayor signed, and then also your approval not to exceed $50,000 in grant revenue for this program on this fiscal year.
Do you have any questions?
I do. So with that amount not to exceed 50,000, is it as a mobilization or training or extra overtime hours in a particular event are completed? Is that when you then get the reimbursement? Is
Yeah,
it by-
it'd be typically reimbursed overtime hours. The mini grants with those, there's a 25% match. We can use the hours that I work, because I work traffic, solely traffic, most days. And the hours that I'm worked, we'll be able to use towards that 25% match on mini grants. There's also equipment mini grants that we can apply for to get new equipment for the vehicles. I think we have radar detectors from 15, 20 years ago that there's a big box in my office that are broken, and we're trying to hold off on getting new ones because the technology's so outdated. I think we've paid for the radar devices several times over, so hopefully we'll be able to apply for new radar equipment.
Most of the police departments across the state and the sheriff's offices, they really rely upon this program. And there used to be a lot more equipment available. They've kind of cut back on what you can get, but there's other programs now that OHS has where our equipment's available.
If the accumulation or of all of these programs exceeds 50,000, we'll come back and ask for authorization above that. Otherwise, we handle it administratively underneath that cap.
Do you anticipate any decrease in the amount utilized based on having a more full force?
We'd still apply for the
Like
overtime
maybe-
reimbursement.
yeah.
We'd still apply for the overtime reimbursement through the state.
Right.
I don't want to say it's free money because it's not. It still requires some of the money to come from somewhere. But it would be the ability for us to be able to apply for those funds on an overtime basis or equipment reimbursement basis.
Maybe it's kind of a broader question. I mean, I'm hoping
Well,
you
I-
all have to
I can give you a
less
little more
overtime
detail.
that you
Yeah.
have to put in because of being more
These
fully
are,
staffed.
these hours with
Overall.
the contract for the TIGPA should be above and beyond our normal overtime hours.
And each emphasis ranges right around 2,500 to 3,200 is the maximum that we can apply for. So they can figure out how many officers' hours they need within the award that we've asked for. And we don't exceed it. Sometimes we'll be a little bit under, and then they file a performance report that has the exact amounts on it. And so it's not a large amount of money, but it does cover the overtime for the emphasis period. And they they may already be doing emphasis in those areas during that time anyhow, so it supplements that, but it is overtime only.
I guess to give you an idea, the last grant that we did for impaired driving for the holiday season, it was a $2,500 grant reimbursement that we had, and that afforded us approximately 40 man-hours of patrol time extra, above and beyond what we already have on the street.
What happens if it does go over?
We don't get
I
reimbursed.
make
Okay,
sure, that part of my job is to make sure that doesn't happen, and I'll call officers if if an officer gets a DUI arrest and he takes more time than what he had originally allotted, I'll call the other officers and ask them to trim it so that we can keep it within that, hopefully not go over more than $10.
The officer will get paid.
Yeah.
It's just, they're not going to not enforce the law. If they have to go into our overtime, our regular overtime, they will do so. We want to leverage as much of this state money as we can.
So the state already has a set determined amount that they'll issue each police department per emphasis or mobilization, and so you can only apply for a certain amount. And like I said, the most we've seen, I think, is 3,400 or 3,600, but the ones this year are all averaging 2,500 to 3,000.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the equipment ones?
The equipment ones, we'd go through a special grant process, mini grant process. I would essentially write up a grant where our needs are, what type of equipment we want to purchase, and then go through them. I would probably contact the grant office down there and ask them what's pre-approved. So that way I can start estimates and then say,
Okay.
can we get this?
There's, I would say, about 8 different pieces of equipment that are available through the program. There's the LiDAR, the radars. Help me out. There's a couple of other ones I can't remember off the top of my head, but those are the ones we normally ask for. We have other resources for the bulletproof vests, and so some of the officers or programs use the for the bulletproof vests, but we have a different one that we use for that. I think they had also some MDT equipment, but we've had other grants that have covered us for that. So we do, we watch what resources are out there and make sure that we're utilizing and maximizing each program to its fullest.
Sure. Okay, well, wow, I didn't realize we could get equipment. I knew we did the mobilizations, because I may or may not have been stopped during. May or may not. So, in light of that, I will move that we recommend ratification of the 2020 Traffic Enforcement Grant Project Agreement. Good Lord, the certifications and assurances and the subrecipient risk assessment required for participation in the program for mobilization during specified highway safety performance plan focus area events, campaigns, and/or mini grant requests up to an accumulative amount per program fiscal year of $50,000 with administrative approval.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Authored that.
Thank you for
Yeah,
making the
that was a
motion.
long distance run right
And it's
there.
so detailed because it is federal money that the state receives and is redistributed.
I'm
so-
good with that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you too, Officer Warner.
I'm staying,
Does that go on consent? Okay, Thank
Again,
you, sir.
nothing controversial on it.
okay. Our next item is the Fire Department, FM Global Fire Prevention Grant Approval. Alisa, again, hello, and Chief Nickerson. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon.
So, this is the FM Global. This is the first time we've applied for this grant. It's a worldwide philanthropic organization that supports fire prevention. And we did a search for using our software and found this one, and then Brian, I think, was aware of it also. So we submitted an application, and it was a little bit different of an application than we'd done before. And I had looked back at the historical applications, and they fund, large metropolitan departments normally, and there were a few smaller departments in there that they funded. So we submitted our application, and it was kind of a short time frame that we did it. And normally we will, on these ones that we don't know if we're going to be awarded, we'll wait until we find out, and then we'll come before you before we accept the money. I did hear from Karen that the check arrived on Friday, though, so. Anyhow, I will let Brian talk to you a little bit about the equipment he requested and what they will use for it, and then we'll go ahead and go through the approval process.
Well, the equipment, it sounds very simple. It's two DeWalt tool sets, and then also some lights for investigation purposes. What that's going to do is, it's going to allow us to put that in the fire marshal's vehicle and the inspector's vehicle, and not keep an engine necessarily there for any investigation that we do. They'll probably be there on occasion for a length of time, or if we need other tools or equipment that is not in those vehicles, and plus for manpower. But this will allow us to free up the engine a little bit sooner, a little bit quicker, and kind of be self-sustaining versus just relying on just the engine itself or other things. So, but the tools are very important to the investigation process of just the way we function and operate. We work with the PD very closely with obtaining evidence if we need to. The arson fires that we had over in August on Police River Drive, we borrowed some tools and got them to work, and this all got. So this kind of went hand in hand with, hey, let's apply for that and see if we can get it. I mean, it's a little bit of little grant, but it goes a long way too. So for our processes and stuff, so it'll be very beneficial.
Yes, so we applied for 2,500 and we were awarded 1,780. And the fire department has a equipment budget that they use throughout the year that has funding available to make up the difference of the total purchase. And so we were really excited about this. We had a little bleep in the newspaper last week about it, and they're going to make a visit to us. I'm not sure where that person will be coming from yet, but the letter, we received a check and a letter on Friday, and so they'll be scheduling to come out. So we'll certainly let staff and the mayor know about that. If there's anything that we need to do to have a celebration, I guess, huh?
And just so you know, the process on these smaller grants, as Lisa indicated, if they're very small, rather than take the council's time to apply for them, we'll look at them, determine if there is a match, what the work, administrative work is on it, the probability of a positive result, and those will be approved to apply for administratively. If they are successful, then we'll come in and ask the council to approve the funding.
We will certainly calendar this program for next year. Okay.
There's
Great.
just one little thing in our agenda, under staff recommendation, it says 1720, but down below it says 1780.
That's just a
Typo.
typo.
So,
I
but it's
apologize. That
that's
was
okay.
me.
But it is the 1780, is that what the check was for?
1720, I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah.
1720. Okay.
Thank you for catching that, Brandy.
Any other questions? Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's pretty awesome.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. I'm
Thanks.
staying again.
Consent agenda again, ma'am?
I need somebody to make a
Yeah.
motion.
Oh, I thought you already did.
Nope.
I lost it, sorry.
I recommend acceptance of the FM Global Fire Prevention Grant Award for $1,720 to purchase fire investigation equipment.
I'll second.
Yes, consent agenda, please, sir. Okay, our last item is yet another Elisa item. It is the local
my
highway
best friend,
safety
Nate.
improvement. Oh, Nate.
Yep.
This is gonna be fun now. Local Highway Safety Improvement Program Grant Application, A Street and Baker Street Intersection Safety Improvement Project. I vote for smaller titles on everything.
Me too.
Starts out with a big program name and then it just gets bigger and bigger.
Well, I especially, because we have new council members today, wanted to put the full name out there and make sure that I wasn't using acronyms that were unfamiliar. So again, today, this is a program that has been very good to us. We've been applying ever since actually it was created, and I think that was 6 years ago, maybe 8. I can't remember. I've lost track. So each year, we put in an application. We have consistently, I think we had 1 year where they had some specialized money that we applied for, and we were awarded, but then we had to move a program to another year because of a cost overrun. But I'm sure Councilmember Kelly will be aware of the sidewalk on Polk. Yes, that was one of those programs, one of the projects that we did with this program. And so that sidewalk went from East Street to Rodeo. And then actually it extended up to Greenside's Place connection. And then that project was a little over budget, so we ended up trading another project to get some more money into that one. So the next project we had is been deferred because it came in over budget. And that would be the 6th Street Safety Improvement Project. And it came in higher this last fall, last summer. 2 other awards that we have in the statewide transportation improvement plan right now are the 3rd Street improvements under this program. And all of those are under final design review right now, and we're hoping to put them out. I mean, you're ahead of myself. They're in design.
They're in design right
In
now.
design
So
right now.
design this year
And then construction
construction the
next year.
following.
We
Yep.
have so many projects that I have to keep them all straight. So, this program is based upon accident history that's actually collected by the police department or the state patrol. And so I'll let Nate go over with you how he reviews the information and makes a recommendation to staff, and then he has a PowerPoint regarding the project, and then we'll go through the approval.
Okay, so several of you may be familiar with different parts of this in different commissions and presentations that we've had leading up to this. So this is the final getting ready to apply for the grant presentation. So the LSIP stands for Local Highway Safety Improvement Plan, and essentially it's federal money that the state has agreed to provide to local jurisdictions for accidents on their systems. So for this particular grant, it prioritizes Class A, which are known as disabling injury, and then fatal crashes. So for any corridor to even be eligible, there must be either a disabling injury or a fatal crash on that corridor. And the approval is basically, it's entirely based on the benefit cost ratio, which is essentially how the state views the cost to them of each of these accident types versus the cost of the improvement. And typically, historically, below 8, so basically below a benefit of 8 to 1, we don't see approval in the past. One of the things we have, it's on a sliding 5-year scale for accidents. So because of kind of the history that Elisa went through, we've sort of end-loaded a lot of these projects. So we've got 3 different years happening currently. So we've addressed a lot of the qualifying areas in the city, and that actually leads us, this A and Baker is one of the few remaining qualifying areas that would be eligible for this grant. So A Street, this is looking at A Street because it's pretty much the driver of most of what's going on in this intersection. We have a high traffic volume on this street. In addition to that, there's a large, apartment complexes. There are apartment complexes all around this intersection, but we're considering the ones to the north because those, residents will certainly need to cross the street in one form or another. But what we're seeing is there's over 800 bedrooms in these just 2 blocks just to the north of this intersection. In addition, we have the school zone that won't be there for much longer with the new construction of Logos, but it is a current school zone. And then this is as we mentioned, it's an arterial road, it's wide, it's got parking on both sides, so your pedestrian crossings are 40 to 45 feet, no matter which leg you're attempting. Here you can see just a kind of what it looks like to drive this corridor. This is running downhill from both sides, basically cresting a hill and then coming downhill to this intersection, so it's somewhat problematic geometry for pedestrians. The existing configuration has 5-foot walk all around. All of these pedestrian ramps here are non-compliant. They don't either have truncated domes and they don't meet the slope requirements that the ADA specs. In addition, we have some non-compliant driveways on this corridor also that don't meet the cross slope requirements of ADA. This is just a brief run of the crash data. What I try to look at is, are we seeing overrepresented crashes? Because we can't necessarily do everything about all crashes, but what we're seeing here is this only represents less than 1% of the total crashes in the city, but we've got almost 7.5% of the Class A crashes and 8.5% of pedestrian crashes. So we're seeing a high injury, high pedestrian involved crashes here. Our proposed improvements include a 120-foot diameter compact urban roundabout. We're going to put 8-foot sidewalk around the edges of the roundabout, which will serve as a mixing lane for both pedestrians and bicyclists. replace all the, with compliant pedestrian ramps, all the existing ramps, add some illumination, and install some splitter islands, which will also serve as pedestrian refuge islands. So they'll be installed wide enough that they can legally meet that distinction. And there is a rough sketch that one of our techs came up with. This is the proposed configuration. Obviously, this is pre-designed, but this is typically what we see in these kinds of installations. So as we've been able to finalize the numbers just a little bit since the application, so we had given you a range on the application, but now we're down to $798,000 for the cost with a local match of $58,573. And that leaves us to a cost-benefit ratio of 9.6. So this is slightly low, but it's definitely within what we've seen approved before.
I will also mention that we have another project that we've been approved for that will be designed next year, and it is on public, and it will be from Lincoln to Polk. And we had a fatality in that area. The project that was approved to have us at least be able to put sidewalk on one side of the street and reconfigure that little intersection there on Public and Polk. So I was just adding up quickly in my head with what projects we've had approved so far to date. This program has brought the city about $2 million before this project over time, and so it's definitely has been of a benefit to the city, and it really does focus on safety, pedestrian safety and vehicular safety. So this application is due on Thursday. And so with the numbers that Nate brought forward, I don't know if we'll do any more refining, but what we had put in the CCSR is that we wanted to submit an application not to exceed $800,000 with the reciprocating match of 7.34%.
Questions?
My only question is, when you put the roundabout in, how does that affect the plowing structure?
It's a difficult thing to plow, but basically you just essentially use a smaller radius turning vehicle for those, and should be able to manage slowly, similarly to how you would manage a regular plowing. Snow storage becomes a slight issue, but that's one of the reasons we're proposing having the green strips before, and essentially before and after on the route, so a plow could deposit the snow that they would be carrying there.
And this will be an additional amenity to the A Street project that we will be constructing this summer, and I think that we'll have a much safer corridor all across A Street there. So we will fight for this one. Nate and I usually get a call before they go to committee and asking us a few more questions, and can we size it? Maybe not. Last year we did size, we went down quite a bit. But the staff at ITD are and the local highway technical assistance council are great, and they're very supportive of Moscow. We very much appreciate them.
Yeah. I like the bulb outs that make you go slower as you get to the intersection. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
My son lived there during college in the apartment through there, and it was crazy.
Our speed study's a little older, but yeah, we're seeing, 85th percentile speeds closer to 40 miles an hour than 30 miles an hour,
Well,
so.
going downhill, it's easy to do.
It's easy to not look at your speedometer there, certainly.
And that's certainly one of the areas where we'll see increased population with the apartments that continue to build.
It's true.
So Nate, you mentioned that there are just a handful that could potentially qualify. So of all of them, what is making this one rise to the top?
Honestly, it's because there was two Class A accidents here versus a single Class A in the other areas. Some of the other areas the Class A accidents are hard to address programmatically. It's, someone lost control on an icy intersection and was in an unfortunate crash, but it's hard to rebuild an entire, infrastructure for that.
So the roll of the dice on these are that each district is allocated a certain amount of money, and they have a certain amount of money statewide. And so we never really know what other cities we're usually competing against, Lewiston and whoever, is in District 2. Could be
The top 5
Yeah,
populous,
so, yeah, and so they usually approve between anywhere from 3 to 6 projects, depending upon the applications. And we've been lucky enough to be above the red line many times. So, and then if a project doesn't make it this year, it's always, we don't know what will happen the next year, and we'll have additional traffic data, so we could also resubmit again.
And then the last question, like, how can, I don't know how to word this, but feel confident that that 800,000 is high enough, just the way that bids have been coming with projects in the last couple of years? I mean, are you,
So there's, you try to adjust, we track all of our unit costs as they come in. And so when we see kind of a sharp inflation like that, we adjust for that. So this $800,000 number is weighting a little more heavily some of the more recent bids where we've been seeing some higher numbers, trying to accommodate for the current bidding climate. As much as we can, trying to account for that. Because it is absolutely, once this is programmed, that's all we get.
And so this is an FY22 application, which means that most likely it would be designed in '22 and constructed in '23. So they, all the projects are on the transportation plan for 2 to 3 years, waiting to make it to the top before the money's available.
And further, we do actually add an escalation factor for each year. So 2019 estimate is not the same as 20, 21, and 22, depending on the construction year.
Yeah.
So that is also built
I
in.
mean, do you feel like you have a little more information, knowing of how things have come out the last couple of years that are helping you to perhaps give a more,
Yeah, we've got a year and a
Accurate.
half of history with some of these escalated bidding costs. Obviously what happens next year for the construction climate could vary, but we believe we've incorporated as much of the risk as we can.
And having the variables for the A Street project too was a good baseline, and then look at the inflationary costs from there. So these guys do a really good job at planning for future. And worst case scenario, there seems to always be a little bit of money somewhere else in another kitty that if they really like a project, they'll find a way to fund it with additional funds. Or
Except
they'll,
for A Street.
except for A Street? Yeah.
That's the urban committee.
we could run, that's going to be a historical book someday.
all right, well, as soon as it sounds like it's probably the one that we have the best shot of competing for, I would recommend approval to submit the grant request for the LSIP fiscal year 2022 application for the safety improvements to the intersection of A and Baker Streets.
Second.
Excellent.
Are we on
Okay.
consent agenda for
Consent,
that?
sir?
or-
Yes, ma'am.
All right,
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Okay, that is the last item on our agenda. I will move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.